Hello there, welcome back. Jason Napalm here, and today we're going to be reading from 2 Corinthians chapter 11, Paul and False Apostles. Verse 1. I would to God you could bear with me a little in my folly, or put up with me in my foolishness. Indeed, bear with me, put up with me. For I am jealous over you with godly jealousy. For I have espoused you to one husband, that I may present you as a chaste virgin to Christ. But I fear somehow, as the serpent deceived Eve through his trickery, so your minds might be led astray from the simplicity that is in Christ. For if he who comes preaches another Jesus, whom we have not preached, or if you receive another spirit which you have not received, or another gospel which you have not accepted, you might submit to it readily enough. For I think I am not in any way inferior to the most eminent of the apostles. Even though I am unpolished in speech, yet I am not in knowledge. All things about us have been thoroughly revealed to you. So we see here that people at that time, they would come along and speaking about Jesus, but it wasn't the Jesus that Paul and the apostles taught. And the Jesus of the Bible, the Jesus of history, these were other versions that people had made up of Jesus. For a full understanding of all the various types of Jesuses that were going around that time, I would recommend reading a book called Against Heresies by Irenaeus, who was disciple of Polycarp. Polycarp was a disciple of the Apostle John. So he's like second, third generation Christian. And he wrote about various heresies and false teachers and false versions of Jesus. Okay. But Paul's saying here that some of these people come along and preach another Jesus and people would just submit to that and just believe it. I guess just because they thought, oh, they're talking about Jesus, so that's good. Then we're all on the same page. But on the contrary, it wasn't the Jesus that is revealed throughout the Bible. And even so it is for today. Some branches of the church say they believe in Jesus Christ. They teach about Jesus Christ, but it is not the Jesus of the Bible. It looks like it is, sounds like it is, but on close examination is not who he is. So we have to be very careful and not just to submit to anyone who just says they're speaking about Jesus. Verse 7, did I commit a sin in abasing myself or humbling myself that you might be exalted? Because I preached to you the gospel of God, free of charge. I robbed other churches by accepting wages from them to serve you. See, when Paul went into places, he preached the gospel. He didn't charge. He didn't say, this is how much I expect to get at this meeting. He went there and preached, okay? And sometimes he might go to a church and preach the gospel there, and no one took an offering up for him. He might not have got no money whatsoever. And so he refers here to robbing other churches by accepting wages from them to serve you. So that would be a bit like going to the Corinthian church, preaching there, then Paul hasn't got any money for his journey to the next church and for his needs to be supplied. And so because the Corinthian church, for example, not that they weren't, because they weren't giving him any money, then the church at Ephesus would hear about this, and then the church at Ephesus would say, look, we're going to send you some money because the Corinthians are not taking care of you, basically. So that's what he's referring to as robbing other churches. He wasn't literally taking their money, but it's just the way he explains it. Verse 9, furthermore, when I was present with you and was lacking, I was a burden to no one. For the brothers who came from Macedonia supplied what I lacked. There I was, Macedonia, see? Macedonia supplied Paul with the means and with the financial ability to minister to the Corinthians. For the brothers who came from Macedonia supplied what I lacked. In all things I have kept to myself from being burdensome to you, and so will I keep myself. As the truth of Christ is in me, no one shall stop me from this boasting in the regions of Achaia. Why? Because I do not love you? God knows. And I will continue doing what I'm doing, that I may cut off the opportunity from those who desire an opportunity to be found equal to us in what they boast about. So there's other people going around claiming to be apostles and trying to claim equality with Paul. Now, this is interesting, yeah, because I'm really big into church history. I believe that the best Bible teachers are the apostles, obviously, okay, and Jesus Christ himself. But I believe that the second best Bible teachers are those that were taught by the Apostle John, the Apostle Paul, etc., etc. So we're looking at church history from the 1st century up to about the 4th century. So I'm speaking of people like Polycarp, disciple of John, okay? Irenaeus, disciple of Polycarp. I'm talking about Justin Martyr, Ignatius, Clement, Barnabas. These men, okay, and let's just name it a few, okay, the most popular and the most accurate ones. They were at the very source material of the Bible. These people actually, some of these people actually walked, talked, and fellowships with the disciples, with the apostles, okay? You cannot get anyone closer to the truth than that. And so, to me, when I judge all teaching from modern day preachers, and I'm talking about anyone from the 4th century onwards, I judge and test their teaching by the Bible, okay, but not just the Bible, but how the Bible is being explained and taught by those early disciples and what they call the early church fathers, okay? You might not like the word father, so the early church disciples. And so for someone to come up to me and tell me that somebody from the 15th century starts a whole denomination and they say, oh, this man was a man of God and so forth, and he taught this, taught that and the other. If I find out what he's saying is contradicted and is actually revealed as a heresy, okay, well, I'm just going to come straight out with it, okay? John Calvin, 15th century, yeah? He teaches Calvinism. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details about it, but my point is that if you look at the Calvinistic teaching, it is accepted among a lot of Southern Baptists particularly, and a lot of people who are not anti-Pentecostal, anti-Pentecostal and anti-charismatic, etc., etc. And they're very fixed in their ways, and they believe that John Calvin was speaking the truth of God, and that what he says is what the Bible says, and that he's got it right. Now, I can take you to the book Against Heresies by Irenaeus, who was an early church disciple, and there is at least 4 to 6 pages, which I've done a video on, of exposure on the heresy of the predestination teaching as taught by John Calvin. Okay, so now when somebody comes to me and says, well, John Calvin taught this and taught that, I'm saying that means nothing to me, because he came 1500 years after Christ and the apostles. He's a modern preacher, and his teaching goes against the early church teachings of Polycarp, Justin Martyr, and Ignatius, Irenaeus, and so forth. So that's what we need to do, see. To separate the false apostles from the true apostles, we need to go back to the original apostles and their disciples. So anyone after that time that contradicts the writings of the early church, I haven't got time for that. And it has helped me fantastically in my understanding of the Bible. It has helped me to know what truly was practiced in the early church. Now, I may be going off a little bit here, but bear with me. It has taught me that things like the gifts of the Spirit were still in manifestation from the 1st to the 4th century, at least. Okay? And that various other Christian practices that we have today were being practiced at that time as well. Ones that Calvinism will teach that are no longer here anymore, such as the gifts of the Spirit they're not for today, and other various teachings and stuff. So Paul was separating himself from these false apostles. These false apostles, they would try and imitate the apostles, but then they would do the opposite, such as where Paul wouldn't charge money for the gospel, the false apostles would. They would say, come to our meeting, now give us a certain amount of money. Obviously, they wouldn't use the word registration and sell tickets and stuff like that, but that's what they do now. Book this seminar for the weekend, and it costs this and costs that, blah blah blah, and etc etc. And I understand that buildings have to be rented out and and hold auditoriums and all the rest of it, but you know what I'm getting at. Hopefully. Now, verse 13 says, "For such are false apostles and deceitful workers, disguising themselves," or as the King James says, transforming themselves as the apostles of Christ. Transforming themselves. Now, these people who are apostles are self-ordained. And I see this as an enormous thing in the United States and in the African countries where people are barely out of school, okay? Maybe late teens, early 20s, and they've got the title of apostle this and prophet that and all the rest of it. And I'm just thinking, so what constitutes the office of the apostle and prophet? How do you determine that's what you are? And I've spoken to some of these people and they said it's just a matter of you just choose the title and you go with it. So I think Apostle Jason has got a nice sound to it, so I'll go with that. Or maybe Prophet Jason sounds a bit more spiritual. Or maybe Pastor, more authoritative. And they just choose names. They transform themselves into the apostles of Christ. They transform themselves into ministries that God has not called or gifted them to. And it's just a load of games. It's an ego inflating and manipulation of people. Because not being funny, if I went to church here and somebody said, here's the pastor, I'll go, great. And then if somebody said, here's apostle so-and-so or prophet so-and-so, it just seems to be wide to us a bit in sort of like Pentecostal or maybe in charismatic circles. Apostle's the highest one. Prophet's second highest. Pastor's probably third, maybe fourth. And so it comes down to hierarchy. So a person will ignore the pastor of the church and go straight and seek the apostle or the prophet, hoping to get a word of revelation or, something, prophecy. Therefore, verse 14 should I say, and no wonder, for even Satan himself disguises or transforms himself into an angel of light. Therefore it is of no great thing if his ministers also disguise themselves as ministers of righteousness, whose end will be according to their works. Now notice it says here that these are actually ministers of Satan. I mean, that's scary. I mean, jeepers creepers, the idea that Satan has got his ministers out there, and these ministers actually infiltrate the church and transform themselves into the ministers of Christ, whose end will be according to their works. And sometimes we see these false apostles and prophets and false teachers, and I'm sitting back and thinking, Lord, seriously, please don't. I don't mean this in irreverence, Lord, but these people are ripping people off. They're conning people. They're fleecing people, scamming, and they're taking advantage of your people, etc., etc. If I was God, I'd probably took them out, took them off the picture right now. I'd have zapped them straight out of there, or maybe appeared to them and said, "You need to pack this up because you're deceiving people." But it says that the end will be according to their works, and sometimes these people will live out their full life, and they will deceive people till their last breath. But that's where the separation of the goats and sheep come in, see, on the last days. So sometimes we have to sit back and say, do you know something? These people are false teachers and false prophets. What am I going to do about it? Well, obviously I'm not going to follow their ministry. I will let people know that these are false ministers, but I'm not going to make that my ministry. There's no ministry in the Bible or office of telling people, pointing people's faults out and pointing who's wrong and who's right kind of thing. So we need to keep a balance and make sure that we're preaching the gospel above all things. Okay. what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop here, because this is pretty big chapter and there's a lot of content to it, and it's been 15 minutes now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back in the next video with part 2 of chapter 11, and we're going to continue from there. Okay, well, God bless you. Hope you enjoyed this video, and hope you catch me in the second part. God bless you in Jesus' mighty name. Bye bye.